Hey guys, welcome to the Q&A stream that I didn't ultimately expect to do initially. The 2.5K Q&A. Holy crap, has it only been like, what, 2 months since the official 1K Q&A, where like Ocean and I hung out after a little bit of time by myself? Chrissy has decided to join me. Chrissy is a good friend of mine. You may actually know her for the excellent research that she gave me when I did the Pride video on like ancient Canaanite stuff, and for a few other shout outs that I've given her for some fantastic research stuff she's helped me out with when I'm doing biblical things, particularly one of the videos that I did fairly recently in terms of any sort of Christianity addressing videos. Like it was one of the last ones I did. Do you remember that one, Chrissy, when we were kind of going through various stories and such?
Yeah, that was the does the Bible have does the Bible endorse polytheism, basically?
Yeah, is the Bible polytheist? Which it is, by the way. If you haven't seen that video, it's in my Christians Are Weird playlist. Thank you so much, Akeda Hakubi. I do not have a prison ministry, but that person in the comment section did state that they were going to be playing my videos as part of their prison ministry. And their chaplaincy program to inmates, and that was on my Folkism video. So it looks like they are trying to do some combating of hate, and it also looks like they've got an interest in teaching prison inmates about Hellenism and about healthy Hellenism. So yay. But yeah, Chrissy's going to be here to be hanging out with me through this stream, which I'm really excited about because it has been a long time since she's been back on the channel. The last time I had you here, you were here for the coming out of the broom closet stream, where we were kind of talking about our coming out stories and the way that being pagan is kind of punished.
Yep. Yeah, I think that was the last one. So it's been a while. I've been pretty much out of most of all community stuff. I'm not on Twitter. I'm on Facebook to like the most minimal extent imaginable at this point. Actually, I'm pretty sure there's people trying to get my attention on there.
I mean, I get your attention on there when I want your attention, and you haven't been on Discord for a while.
Yeah, Discord is about the only thing that you can like regularly get a hold of me on anymore. So
Freya, don't apologize for being political. Like, A, this channel is political as hell. Like, it is. It's an education channel, but it's also a political channel. B, our existence is political as hell. If you think you're not, congratulations, you're part of the majority. Like, also, you're wrong.
Yep.
So, rules for the Q&A. This is largely going to be driven by you guys, the chat. You can ask me questions on pretty much anything that is not community-related drama. I don't want to talk about that. I've already gotten as far into the woo stuff as I want to for now, and I've already gotten as far into as much of the community drama that's going on as I'm interested in right now. So I really don't want to talk about that stuff. Like, I want to talk about things that are meaningful. So think politics, identity stuff. If you guys have questions lingering from like the stream that I did on Saturday, or if you have questions about ADHD stuff, I'm happy to rant about that forever. If you have religious questions, like if there's something I haven't gotten around to doing in a video or something that you want clarified, feel free to ask. This one's for you guys. It's the 2.5K Q&A, which it still is dry. I'm baffled that my 1K Q&A was like 2 or 3 months ago. Like the channel has doubled in subscribers seemingly overnight, and that's crazy. I did not expect that to happen.
Yeah, your channel's really picked up. Like, it's really exciting to me.
So Zoe has our first question. So if it's not to ask what led you to your specific branch of polytheism. So this is a bit of a roller coaster, and not the first time I've talked about it on my channel or elsewhere. I did a sort of a deconversion story, if you will, over on Neil's channel a while back, but I can do a kind of short version of that here. I had an experience with Athena when I was still kind of an angry agnostic. I went from being a Wiccan for a while and I also went through an occultism phase as well, which happened. I got trained by a couple of ceremonial magicians And I couldn't really find fulfillment in that. I couldn't really find fulfillment in Wicca either. There was a longing that I had for the longest time for, like, I read the Egypt Game when I was a kid. And there was this scene where, like, these kids, they go into the back of an antique shop and they find all these Egyptian things and they, like, start making offerings to the Egyptian gods, like, in front of these old, like, antique statues and things. And I had this sort of longing when I read that when I was really, really young, where I really wanted that to still be the case, that like temples and things existed, or that you could call on the gods and ask them for things. So when I discovered Wicca, I was like, well, this is as close as you can possibly get in the modern day, not realizing, of course, that Reconstructionists for other religions existed. But again, I couldn't really find fulfillment in Wicca either. So I ended up in an angry agnostic phase for quite some time. And then when I was, I had just gotten out of a float tank, I was buck frickin' nude, headed on the way to the shower, and I was struck with this sort of overwhelming vision of Athena. And by overwhelming, I mean the only words that I can use to describe this feeling is awe. It was this, I would have fallen to my knees if I felt it was appropriate. Like, it felt like I had melted down. I lost the ability to speak for a little while, which, of course, being an angry agnostic at the time, I went and did everything in my fucking power to try to prove that I was crazy, and nobody could. None of my specialists, nobody. But, like, I saw her, and I can't say I was spoken to. More so that I came out kind of knowing two things. The first was that I was to build a shrine, and the second was that I was to begin making offerings to her. And I looked up how to do that because, of course, Wicca has no structure whatsoever for offerings. The whole all acts of love and pleasure are my rituals thing, the whole like magic being central and offerings being strange thing in Wicca, there was no framework that I had for that. And so that's what sort of started to lead me toward Hellenism. And then being as obsessed with research as I am, and following several more very intense religious experiences, I ended up as a Reconstructionist Hellenist and later became a part of this community, not the pagan community at first. I actually was a part of the atheist community to begin with. I worked with a channel that I shall not name publicly because the split was messy. But that's where Chrissy and I met originally. And I worked in doing allyship stuff until we split, and I ended up starting my channel here. So as far as my religious evolution, I've gone through quite a few phases. I grew up Christian, as most people do, but like I never really quite felt like I fit in there. Like I wanted to be a preacher when I was really young, and then I was told, oh, well, you were born with tits, so that's not happening. So, like, I ended up becoming disillusioned with Christianity, and that's where a lot of, like, the whole Egypt game and where all of that sort of proceeded from. I guess I was just kind of destined to be a pagan, whether I liked it or not. So I hope that was a little bit rambling and kind of wandery because, like, getting things into a coherent order is difficult to me a little bit, but I'm hoping that answers your question. A personal experience with a deity that I could not disprove was basically what led me to Hellenism. So let's see. We had another question that I lost. Let's see. Now that the drama is over, what are you most excited to cover that you can on the channel? The answer is yes. I have a massive list of topics. One of the big things that I'm really excited to cover is actually I'm excited to kind of launch my Film Crusade series, kind of examining a lot of like movies and TV shows and other things for the ways that they not just like historical accuracy like I did for my Hercules video, but also things like the misrepresentations of paganism that you see, especially in things like horror movies. There's a lot there. The first one is actually potentially going to be a collab with Surus. We had talked about doing that, about how Han Solo is an atheist conversion or a conversion story that goes all the way from, scoundrel, asshole, all the way to martyr at the end across the series that he's a part of it. So I'm excited to do that. And I'm also excited to partner up with Callan to talk about Hereditary and to talk about The Exorcist. And how demons operated rather differently in ancient Sumer. So we're going to be talking about that, and I'm pretty damn excited. Let's see. We got a super chat. Thank you so much, Melida. I'm sorry it took me a second to read it off. What do you think is the best way to deal with anti-theism in the left? Often when coming out as pagan in leftist groups, I have faced suspicion. Ooh, well, actually, Chrissy, do you want to start this one off? Because you've dealt with quite a lot of that.
Oh.
And you used to be an anti-theist.
Yeah, so yeah, the anti-theist crowd is primarily why I don't have much of anything to do with biblical stuff at all anymore. I don't research it anymore. I don't do much of anything because that is a toxic mess. I have the killing aspect of everything I had to do with my research on the Bible was after I started receiving I received a death threat that made me go to the police. Because how dare I think Jesus existed? So when it comes to the anti-theism, especially on the left, I'm going to be real. I think that the only way to do it is we have to really focus actually on aligning ourselves with atheists in the atheist community that will be allies with pagans and work with pagans, because they're never going, I don't think they're ever going to listen to, anti-theists will listen to us without the support of atheists behind us. I think it's why I'm really, really thankful for people like Jen, who and Surus, who put their support with the pagan community, because without them, I think there'd be no chance of reaching them even in leftist circles. I mean, as a case in point, I don't think there's any way we could talk to Vosh. I don't think Vosh is
Vosh actually watched Ocean's video criticizing his take. Oh, wow. Thank you so much for the $20 super chat variance, though it looks like your text did not send. So if you want to post whatever it was you were going to send, please do. And Child of Nyx and Tara. Holy crap. Thank you so much, guys. Like, huge super chats back to back. I am blown away. Child of Nyx says, no question. Just wanted to say thanks for introducing me to the community. It's helped a lot with my spirituality. I look forward to many more incredibly helpful videos on Hellenism. This week's video on Thursday is going to be on Codice. That is what you guys as patrons voted for. So I'm really excited to do that. I'm going to be talking about some stuff I've talked about in prior videos, but I'm going to be bringing it all together into one coherent whole to talk about reciprocity. And it's going to be kind of a jumping off point, because you have to start with Codice in order to understand concepts like Xenia, which I'm also going to be covering along with the Xenia Declaration sometime in the next couple of weeks. And other sort of like reciprocity type laws, which I'm going to be starting to get into ancient Greek culture as well as ancient Greek religion a little bit. And I'll make sure to differentiate between, you know, when I'm talking about culture and talking about religion in various videos, because there are some aspects of ancient Greek culture we really shouldn't adopt into the modern day. But it's still interesting to learn about it and to dispel some of the myths about it. Kitty Cat Tara, thank you so much, Tara. Questions. Do you have any new creators you plan on working with on your channel, and what are your end of year goals for your channel? I know I've got a couple of other questions before this one, so I'm not going to miss you guys. Don't worry. You don't have to repost them. I am keeping track of who's asking stuff in the chat. New creators that I plan on working with. Yes, actually, I've been in talks to potentially appear on a podcast fairly soon. I also did an interview with, I don't know how familiar you guys are with the anti-MLM community, but Savvy Writes Books. I did an interview with them talking about my experiences with Amway during the early part of my relationship with my husband, then fiance, and like the tail years of my college, and kind of trying to make that work for like as a seller rather than like as a recruiter, and how I got pretty definitive proof that that's not what they wanted. So that's going to be coming out on their channel fairly soon. So I'm excited about that. I also have a relatively new Hellenic podcast that I might be coming on sometime in the next month or two. And a buddy of mine who is a Catholic, Paranormal Encyclopedia, and I have been trying to work out a time for me to come on his channel to talk about Hellenism and kind of like what it is and how to start getting into it and how it's defined. So those are a few creators that I'm planning on working on. As far as end of year goals for my channel, Honestly, I was hoping to get to 2K by the end of this year, so any goals that I had have been blown the hell out the water already. I guess hopefully I could get to 5K. Like, that's something that I'm excited about. Honestly, my channel has been so much more than I ever expected it to be. Like, I did not expect anybody to give a flying crap what I had to say about anything at all. And so both the growth and the incredible community that especially Jen and I have managed to build together with the Bridge, now Coalition, has blown away any expectations or goals I could ever set. Like, my goal is just to be as consistent as I possibly can with getting out content that you guys enjoy, because that's basically where I'm at this point. Ikeda Hakubi says, as a former anti-theist, you have my support. Thank you so much, Ikeda. Ikeda came into the community after watching my video on anti-theism and told a story fairly early on that he initially kind of knee-jerked against it, but decided to watch a few of our live streams between Jen and I, and slowly kind of had his mind changed watching Jen and me and Surus and Ocean, which that is so fucking awesome. Like, your story is still really, really inspiring, Ikeda, and I'm really glad that you found acceptance in the community. Child of Nyx just says, just boosting Asha's signal. I saw Asha's question about fiber arts, and I will get to that, but I do have two other questions that were earlier in the chat. Praxis question. So if you don't feel comfortable, don't answer, obviously, but do you worship the Mosai as a group, individually or mix? The answer is, it depends on what I'm asking for. Most of the time, I do try to worship them individually, mostly because I feel like a few of the muses are significantly more applicable to what I'm doing than others. But sometimes, especially if I'm doing a larger ritual where I'm presenting a lot of offerings to many gods, I will call all of them at once. Be like the 9 daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne, etc. So it really depends on what I'm doing and what I'm asking for. Let's see. Will Midsummer be one of the movies that I will be breaking down? Yes, that is planned for later this year. I was hoping to try to get one of those out a month, and that's obviously not happening. So it is definitely on the docket, and I do have a heathen content creator that I have talked to about potentially collabing with. So I'm kind of excited to get that one done as well, because Midsummer, it's a very interesting movie. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I've been meaning to watch it, but I haven't managed to get around to it.
Have I seen Blood of Zeus on Netflix? No, and from the reviews that I've heard from other pagans, I'm not particularly interested in it. I've seen a lot of trailers and stuff for it. It looks kind of like a typical anime. It also does not look like it's very steeped in the mythology pretty much at all from the trailers that I've seen. Like, I'm a little confused by it. It's a very different experience than, say, like playing the game Hades. So I'm not particularly interested in it. If enough people nag me, I might go watch it and give it a sort of review, but it's just not something that looks like it's kind of in my bandwagon. What are my favorite yarn/fiber arts? If you're asking me what my favorite activity to do, that's obviously knitting. I enjoy crochet and I enjoy great weaving, but knitting is my favorite thing on earth. What are my favorite yarns? I love everything by Brown Sheep Company, just about. If you haven't looked them up, they do the Lamb's Pride series. They also do the Nature Spun series. They focus primarily on wool. Obviously, they're a company out in Nebraska, but their colorways are freaking stunning, and their yarns are very tightly plied. I also really, really like Knit Picks. Knit Picks does some fantastic, their like Dishy and other cotton series are amazing. And I've noticed that, like, especially even when you compare it to some of like the big mainstays like Lion Brand, I'm not the biggest fan of. Same with like Sugar and Cream. Those yarns, the cotton likes to come apart, and like Lion Brand is just a whole mess. Most of their yarns are just not all that good. But like, that almost put me off of cotton yarn forever until I ended up discovering how amazing the Dishy series in particular was from Knit Picks. So those are the two stores that I highly recommend, like in terms of companies. Willow also makes a fantastic Egyptian cotton. Their Ambiance series is to die for. Let's see. This is okay. So let's talk a little bit about why this take is a little bit problematic. Like, you know, there's kind of two ways to go about this. Chrissy, do you want to take this one kind of as a, like, to lead off with a little bit? Like, let's try to take this in good faith. Like, I don't think this person's trying to be hurtful.
No.
Let's kind of like talk about what the problem is with some of the assumptions in this. Because there's, on the one hand, there are risks associated, especially with smaller religions, because you have things like cults and stuff that you need to be concerned about. But there's also cult-like tactics used in a bunch of different groups. So let's talk a little bit about why this is a little bit of a problematic take, and let's talk about like what can be amended as far as that's concerned.
Yeah. So I think that there is going to automatically there's an automatically underlying problem here with first of all the comparison. So like the almost like treating religion as, or well, theism specifically here, as though it is an effect instead of actually having something that is something in and of itself. So the thing here is you should be you should be free to practice responsibly as long as you are knowledgeable and careful with the effects. I don't think that it's necessarily right to actually even just principally view religion as necessarily as an effect.
Well, I don't think it's. I think
Or
there's an underlying assumption that religion is like in some way inherently harmful, the way that a lot of
right,
drugs are.
right, yeah, because I that's what I was more trying to get at there is because all basically anytime someone's going to be talking about the effects of drugs, they're talking about the negatives of drugs. And so talking about religion in the sense of drugs views religion in terms of negative effect.
Well, yeah, it assumes that there is a potential underlying negative effect at all times from religion in the same way that there's always a risk for drugs, but that's not necessarily true. Like there's a sort of anti-theist attitude that religion somehow either undermines skeptical thinking, which it most certainly doesn't. Most pagans that I've met have thought significantly deeper about their religion than some of the atheists that I've talked to who don't seem to know how to talk to us. Quite often, I'll get a lot of arguments against Christianity that make no sense within the confines of my beliefs. So I think that the only issue with that is that it presupposes that there's something inherently negative about faith, and I disagree with that. I don't think that there's anything negative about religion in general, and not all religion is based solely on faith. Faith assumes that you don't have some kind of experience that you feel personally, proves the existence of the gods to you, or at the very least makes it very likely for them to exist within your purview. And for me, at least, I tend to, be fairly skeptical about these sorts of things. But my experience in my purview, I couldn't disprove the fact that a deity had, like, appeared to me effectively in that vision. Like, the overwhelming feeling of awe would be like standing over the edge of the Grand Canyon, looking down into a rolling river, magnified by millions. It was beyond incredible. It was heavier than any dopamine cascade that I've ever experienced. And it happened randomly in the presence of a deity that is undeniably Athena. And there were aspects to that vision that also were historical things that I have never learned that only came out a year or two later as to what they were. I actually made drawings of the clothing she was wearing and noted the color of her cloak and things like that. And that stuff came out later. So
Yeah.
I don't think there's something inherently wrong or, even illogical about faith in deity if it's grounded in personal experience. I don't think that assumption that underlies that particular idea is necessarily fair.
Yeah. Like I recently have switched over to heathenism. I'm specifically more
Heathenry.
yeah, heathenry. I'm more practicing Anglo-Saxon specifically because I felt an actual call from Woden, and specifically things that I actually didn't learn about until I actually finally got a whole book of Old English poetry and actually learned some stuff about it. So I just don't I don't like any of the underlying assumptions of a statement like that.
All right, so we have another question. This one we're each gonna have different answers to, but I'll take this one first because y'all probably know which one this is gonna be, considering I made a whole fucking video on it because I got sick of hearing it. What is a stereotype, trope, etc., that is harmful to my beliefs? I identify both as a pagan and a Hellenist, by the way, so you don't have to worry about offending me. Pagan is not a slur in my view. Zeus is not a fucking predator, and I'm not a fucking mythic literalist. So don't try to at me about mythological arguments that make my deities seem horrible when I don't believe that they literally did any of those things. I think we can understand ancient beliefs and culture through myth, and I think we can understand things about deities through myth, but I don't think any of those things happen fucking literally, and I'm getting sick and tired of people who assume they do when they interact with me. Chrissy, you want to talk about yours?
Yeah, kind of poignant given what happened, unfortunately, January 6th. But yeah, heathens aren't all folkists or racists, or I can't believe I have to say this, but unfortunately, because drama, it has to be said, there is a stereotype which exists of anyone who worships the Norse gods that they're
a white supremacist.
Yeah, a white supremacist or a Nazi or anyone in that particular group. And
the AFA likes to yell really loudly.
Yep. But it's just simply not the case. Declaration 127 exists. And it's very, it's something that we can very specifically point to we can point to particular groups and individuals. For example, like the AFA. The AFA is officially classed a hate organization by the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Yep, and heathens actually worked their asses off to get that to happen. I know a few of the ones that helped out with it.
Yep. So that is an exceptionally.
Can we get an F for fuck focused in the chat, please?
Yeah, please. So yeah, that's an extremely harmful one, unfortunately, that is exceptionally prevalent and still has to be corrected continuously. Hence, we had to work at really hard correcting Rolling Stone.
So we have a question. So I'm going to challenge the phrasing of this question a little bit. I personally do not use the term working with when I refer to the gods. It kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies. I've occasionally defaulted to it when I've seen a lot of it in the chat or something before, but I don't like that term very much. I'm fine with other people using it. It's just not one that I would use, but I do have experience with worshiping Aphrodite, which is what I consider to be my relationship with the gods. Aphrodite is not somebody that I focus on very heavily in my praxis, mostly because, especially in the mythological connotations, she has a lot of association with like uncontrollability and madness in the same way that Dionysos does. But where, like with Dionysos, I've had mostly positive experiences. I've had some really weird ones after worshiping Aphrodite and asking for her help for certain things. So for her, she's one that I tend to be very careful with. I will give her worship on her holy days, and I will give her worship on like days for festivals and things. But she's not a goddess that I feel particularly close to personally. I tend to feel much closer to Hera and Demeter and Athena, obviously. By the way, thank you so much. I saw your super chat, Athena. It was just, I'm trying to keep up with things. So thank you so much for your $2. And thank you also, Ikeda, for your $5. My whole time as an anti-theist, I did not really consider anything besides Abrahamic religions. And that's my experience with a lot of anti-theists, honestly. Most anti-theists assume that all religion is the same because monotheist religions, especially the hegemonic monotheist religions, because not all monotheist religions are hegemonist. Like, they're not. But a lot of the modern sort of powerful monotheist religions have a tendency towards some similar things because a lot of them tend to stem from the Abrahamics.
Yep.
Have I ever been to the Parthenon in Nashville Centennial Park? No, I have not. I would like to go sometime, though. And do you have a list of books and sources from where you get my research? Yes. In the description of every single video, all of the research sources that I used for that particular video are listed in MLA format. And if there's a link to them available for free online, that link will be there as well. So I also, if you are in my Discord, once you get through the gatehouse, there's also a book list called the Resources for the Aspiring Hellenic Polytheist, which I update fairly regularly. that I created for people who really want to deep dive into particular topics. It goes from everything from 101 books with reviews on the various ones that I know of, to like worship and prayer books, to like actual scholarly resources that I have read and confirmed are good scholarly resources, most of which are fairly modern. So let's see. Will I be also looking into video games for paganism, God of War, and others? I only know God of War and Odyssey for Hellenism, at least. Yes, actually. I am currently in the process of getting my ass kicked by Hades. I plan on talking about it. I'm also working on taking notes for, as I'm going through Path of Exile, the theology of Path of Exile, because it's really interesting and there's some theological underpinnings in it to various ancient religions. I plan on tapping Chrissy and Callan for that a little bit, because there's some themes that come from Sumerian and Canaanite stuff. But there's some really, really interesting themes in both Path of Exile and Hades. I'm not a big fan of the Ask Creed series overall. Like, I do not like Assassin's Creed all that much, so I don't really plan on playing Odyssey, though a lot of people have nagged me to do so. Carpathia, you have been noticed. Let's see. Athena, we have had some really good discussions. Let's see, what else do we have? Taking the question charitably, I think the person might say that you reach the point of superstition, then that becomes an issue, but even then the research isn't necessitated. Yeah, Sam, that's why I said I wanted to take that question charitably. Let's see. I'm trying to find another question because there's a lot. Is it okay to claim to be one of the gods? In my opinion, that is hubris. That would be your hubris, but that is hubris. Also, potential cult-like behavior. So I would say, I mean, if it's done in jest, if you're just using it as a username or something, that's one thing. If you're actively, genuinely claiming to be one of the actual gods, like not in jest, which I know Athena, so I know that was a joke. That's something where it's like a pagan is most likely probably going to tell you that you probably need some mental help if you think you are a god or a child of a god, like directly.
Yeah, like in my case, even when I was still practicing as a Canaanite polytheist.
Variance, I saw your message, by the way. Variance meant to send the message. I hope that this is a quarter of the way towards 10K by next year. So thank you so much, Variance, for the well wishing. Anyway, you were saying, Chrissy?
Yeah, I was saying, even when I was practicing as a Canaanite, there is a strong tradition in Canaanite religion, specifically when it with worshiping deified people, and I never really actually managed to sort that out personally. I still am very divided on how to take the worship of heroes and deified people. So, yeah.
I mean, I see hero worship as just an extension of ancestor cults, personally. Like, I don't think that people can be deified, personally. I know that there are people who do think that, and that's valid, but I don't think that that's possible, personally. I think that ancestor cultists is fine, so long as you remember that these people are still human.
Yeah.
Why do you think people assume we're mythic literalists? I think people assume that because the evangelical Christians quite often are, and because evangelical Christians, much like the Focus, think your creationists, your Darth Dawkins types, those kinds. They yell very loudly and are very visible and make people look bad. And because those are the religions that everybody knows exist and they're very in the forefront and have a lot of power in government, smaller religions like the various pagan faiths. It kind of reflects badly. People, when they become, atheist, if they end up anti-theist, sometimes just assume that everybody's like that. And unfortunately, that's part of what allyship efforts like mine, and the channel work that I've done is out there to combat. Because no, we're not mythic literalists, and most of history things weren't that way. But like Christianity especially has gotten such a dominance in a lot of modern culture, and same with Islam in different areas. Like, the mythic literalism of certain aspects of things has become so prominent that there's just this assumption, because there's such a huge population of these groups, that all religion must somehow be like that.
Yeah, I think it's that is that when you're in a society where where you're taught very specific things, and you have a very dominant religion, which is like 70% of the population, and the other roughly 20% has that same quality of largely being mythic literalist. You just learn to think a certain way, and it becomes difficult to conceive of a different way of looking at myth, or just looking at myth in general.
Rowan Hansen, thank you so much for your super chat. I'm sorry that it's taking me a minute to get to super chats. I just want to make sure that I'm getting to people's questions as well. Could you talk about the difference in between orthodoxy and orthopraxy and the ways that dogma can detrimentally affect both? And assuming you haven't already, I did a whole video on why orthodoxy does not belong in paganism, or at the very least, it doesn't belong in pagan communities. If you're interested in that, that's actually in my Common Hellenism series. On my channel page, there's a playlist, and that should be in the playlist. I think orthodoxy can become inherently harmful because people's beliefs can grow and change, and because most of us. I said something in the video to the effect of like VPG, verified personal gnosis, is just UPG with dead people. The only way we know the gods exist is through our experience of them and through the codified and recorded mass experiences of them by the cultures for which they first became known. So because of that, we don't necessarily even know if the particular practices and beliefs that came about are exactly what the gods intended or exactly who the gods are specifically, like down to the letter. Especially for religions where we don't have a lot that survive. But for like Hellenism, where there's a crap load, like so much so that like when you talk about being a recon, you have to specify the era and the area, because like city-states had radically different ritual calendars, right? And we have, almost 1,000 years of recorded stuff. You can get to the point where you have to really look deeply at what how can I explain this? If you're putting forward orthodoxy, you kind of got to look deeply as to why you feel like other people have to believe exactly the same as you. Like, what is it that you feel threatened by, or what is it that you feel you're getting out of that? Orthopraxy is a bit different. Orthopraxy is like, there's a right way to do practice. And again, I'm not the biggest fan of it all the time. I think that there's a historical way to do things and there are eclectic ways to do things. And I think that both can be valid for a personal praxis. I personally tend to go with the historical way more often than not, because that's what I feel called to do. But I'm not going to shame somebody for, like, for example, making an offering of perfume to, say, Heracles or something like that. Like, we don't necessarily, or essential oils, which did not exist at all in antiquity. These things, essential oils have their own problems. They're environmentally harmful, or at least some of them are. And there's a whole thing. I'm going to be doing a video on that in the future. But like, I'm not going to shame somebody for doing something that is not historical. I think that orthopraxy and orthodoxy, when taken to their extremes, could become harmful to a community, because you basically fossilize your faith when you take these on. And that's kind of where we've gotten the mythic literalism and stuff from certain branches of Christianity. Like, when you don't have the ability for a religion to breathe and grow and expand and live, then at that point, you've got a problem. Chrissy, do you have any thoughts on this one?
My thoughts on it are, if you think like, I just don't think that that either the concept of orthodoxy or the concept of orthopraxy are either desirable or even realistic. If you think that orthodoxy or orthopraxy have any ability to even be realistic, I mean, just look at church history. Neither of them ever existed. If you think they do, just look at the history of all the changes the various popes have made. There is no orthodoxy, even though they pretend there is. Orthodoxy just
there's the orthodoxy of the present day. It's the method of control
right.
for the present day.
Right, exactly. And so, as far as I'm concerned, the goal toward orthodoxy is not only a misguided one, but a dangerous one. And the same thing, I think, with orthopraxy. I don't think that there's a necessarily right way of having having praxis.
Let's see. Do you think Athena can watch over those who respect wisdom and warfare without believing in her existence? I don't think that the gods are limited by whether or not you believe in them. In fact, in my experience, even if you don't, they will get your attention if they want it.
Same.
What is hubris? I actually covered this in my video on pride. Hubris has a bunch of different definitions. There was a legal definition in ancient Greece where hubris was a actual legal crime, and there were a lot of crimes that could fit under hubris. The penalty for hubris was sometimes death. The way that it's used in the modern day is excessive pride to the point of thinking you're above the gods quite often. So, like, if you're declaring you're on par with the gods, that's still kind of hubris. So that's how I tend to use it, is I use it in the more colloquial modern definition of thinking you are either at the level of or better than the gods. And there are lots and lots and lots of stories in ancient mythology about what happens to people who think that way. I do my best not to.
I helped with that video.
Yes, you did. You helped. You got a massive shout out in the middle and at the end for helping out with that video. Yep. So I did talk about what had me follow the Hellenic path toward the beginning, so I'm not going to repeat that story again, Raven. But if you watch the VOD when it gets posted later, you can get the answer. That was one of the first questions that was asked. What were some things that I found to be hard when starting out? Ritual structure and getting used to the feeling of ritual and offering and the rhythm of prayer and ritual and how different that interaction is when you're a pagan versus when you're a Christian, and the differences in attitudes towards prayer. That was very difficult for me to get into at first. It felt awkward and strange, but it also felt satisfying. And so there was this weird dichotomy of kind of cognitive dissonance as I worked through a lot of my latent Christianity early on. Chrissy, what would you say was difficult for you?
Praxis was like actual ritual was a very hard thing early on, and it's still pretty difficult because I am not in a space where I am out of the broom closet with my family or with the people of this town, which are incessantly conservative to the point I'm pretty sure at least one of them was at DC. So yeah, not the kind of place where you make known that you're not Christian, much less that you worship other gods, because this is the kind of town that might get the idea it's a good idea to lynch you. So,
yikes.
Yeah. Ritual is a very difficult one for me. Oh, sorry about that. It was, I think, my email. Ritual is a difficult one. Just generally even having conversations like this, I'm able to have this conversation at all because my parents are away. So yeah.
We got a quick question. What is Reconstructionist? Reconstructionists are people who are trying to practice ancient religions and bring them into a modern context. So this has to be specifically a religion that is no longer practiced in the modern day by a living social group, or wasn't for a certain period of time, usually at least a century or two, quite often thousands of years. And you are like, that person has either researched or, worked through books and things from somebody who has done the research, what those ancient practices were, and attempts to revive them in the modern day, sometimes with modifications, obviously. Like, for example, as a Hellenist, I don't have an ancient polis that will throw massive parties at certain parts of the year. Like, that's just not a thing. Like, parties meaning the festivals here, which they were gigantic parties, quite a few of them. They were also very sacred events with offerings and such. But those festivals and such would not, they don't happen now. At least not in the place where I live, at the very least. So I have to create modified versions of what those things represented through a shitload of historical research, some of which takes up the majority of my life. That's what a recon is. It is religion with homework. Do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, even down to the point where, a major part for me of my of how I practice my religion and how I practice just worship in general is writing. The research on writing, specifically, like how Germanic people wrote, why they wrote, what was considered the proper way of presenting story is excessively dense. It is all Reconstructionism is not only with homework, it is oftentimes like tearing your eyes out through a boring monograph that makes you want to cry because it's so hard to read.
I once read a lexicographical study on a single word and made a video out of it. That was Hosios. It was a 400-page lexicographical survey on the word for piety. That's the kind of granular you can get as a Reconstructionist, because we don't have the Etic perspective, the native perspective anymore. We only have the outside emic perspective.
Yep. And not only that, we only have the outside perspective often of a scholar.
Or was it? Or did I get those backwards? Did I get those backwards? I might have gotten emic and etic backwards. I'm tired. Forgive me if I got them backwards.
I'm an English major and I don't know, so I don't care.
I am going to go obsessively make sure that I did not screw up.
But yeah.
Yep, I got them backwards. I was right. We only have the etic perspective. We do not have the emic perspective.
Yeah. And from that, we also usually, when we're doing Reconstruction, have the perspective of people who never learned to actually write something interesting. I don't know how you can make half the time when I'm reading a history book, they manage to present every last thing they're talking about in the most boring and mind-bogglingly just excruciating way possible.
There's at least a couple of books on Hellenic history that do not do that, shockingly. There's at least 2 writers I can think of that are scholars that did a really good job where I actually enjoyed reading their books. But a lot of them, yeah, I mean, historical writing is dry on purpose because their audience is not us. Their audience is not the average reader. Their audience is the board that they're trying to impress with their dissertation.
Yeah. The ones that get me are German authors. Like, I love you, Germany, but I don't need you to repeat for 100 pages the exact same thing.
Ikeda, thank you so much for your $5 super chat. I also do not recommend the AA quetting method of apotheosis. I did a video on that too. Let's see. I'm trying to find another question. I agree. The only essential oil that the ancients had was olive oil, and boy, is it essential. Let's see. I am trying to find another question. There's a lot. What are signs of a deity calling you? There are a lot of different signs that a deity could be calling you. The problem is that that's so subjective that I can't necessarily give you a list of signs of a deity calling you. What I can tell you is if you feel like one is calling you, chances are that's probably what's going on, if there's enough of it. I wouldn't recommend over-analysis of signs looking for that, which if I were to give you a list, you'd probably do, because humans are obsessive. We do that. What I would suggest is if you feel like a deity is calling you, research them. And I'll give the same recommendation I gave to Chrissy when she first came to me as a pagan before she came out. Try out a little bit of praxis after doing a bit of research. Engage with that deity, see how you feel. Don't make like an oath of fealty right away, or anything like that, or even at all sometimes. But not all of us feel called to do that, and it's a very risky thing to do. But try out some praxis, because you don't have to continue on that path if it's not right for you. There's nothing that absolutely commits you 100% the way that, say, a baptism is supposed to. Within paganism, you could engage in praxis for a while and decide that you no longer want to have that relationship and let go. I'm sorry that wasn't more helpful, but discernment is a thing that you really have to develop over time as a pagan. Especially if you deal with mental illness of any kind, sometimes, for example, if you've got excessive anxiety, you might start taking a lot of things as omens that aren't, or if there's a lot going on in your life, you can do that. Then sometimes you'll miss signs that a deity is calling you because you haven't developed the skills to see them. And in hindsight, you'll be like, holy crap, I'm an idiot. So the answer is, if you feel like a deity is calling you, chances are that could be what's going on. Test it out, see what happens. There's no harm in it.
Yeah. If we ever were to create a list, I'm pretty sure that we could end up with about 75 volumes of 800 pages each on all of the different ways, and we'd still never cover them all.
Well, because like experience with deities is so deeply personal. Like I talked about that in my votive offerings video that came out last Thursday. Like there's as many individual ways to experience the gods as there are individuals.
Yeah, like what, like as Dylan put, Dylan regards them as much more powerful than evolved minds. And when we're dealing with figures like that, of course, there's going to be just a practical infinite number of ways, because all these experiences are subjective. And frankly, as you also pointed out earlier, I don't even think that they are. I don't think that the gods are limited in how they can call us, or even if we have to be when they interact.
I don't even think you have to be. I don't even think you have to be called to a religion. Like if you feel the desire to worship a particular set of gods, do your research and do it. Like I don't see, like, the obsession with calling. I think a lot of us have felt called and a lot of us do feel that way. But if you desire to worship those gods, if you feel yourself like that is something you want to do, then go for it. Like, do your research, make sure you're informed if you want to take a Reconstructionist path, but go for it.
Yeah. Also, real quick, because you touched on the like the oath of fealty and stuff like that. This is actually something very, very near to me right now, because that is like the central theme of the piece I'm writing. I'm writing basically an epic of Hengist and Horsa, who are the legendary founders of the Kingdom of Kent, and they supposedly brought the Saxons over during the Saxon invasion, and the central theme of my story is specifically about oaths and oath taking and oath breaking. And oaths are just, when you get into the research of it, oaths are not something ever to be taken lightly.
No.
Ever. And
oaths are something that the ancients used sparingly, if at all, and generally after something had happened, especially like with what evidence we have within heathenry, rather than before. And within Hellenism, oaths were considered divine things that, if broken, could bring Agos down on your head. This is not something you want to take lightly. I've made a total of 2 in my religious time, and both of them are promises that I have kept.
Yeah. And when it comes to oaths and oath breaking, the process of oath breaking is, especially if not done with some of the most intricate considerations, can be exceptionally devastating. In heathen tradition, if anyone's interested, there's a lot of different works you can go into on that. One of the most key examples is the Saga of Jomsvikings. Be exceptionally careful when it comes to oaths.
What resource would you give someone that didn't want to practice said belief but wanted to be more knowledgeable of the actual beliefs of the followers? The problem with recon paganism, or paganism in general, is any one thing that I could suggest to you would not be enough because of the religion with homework problem we talked about earlier. What I recommend is listening to practitioners of those faiths, like talk to them individually, and don't assume that we all believe the same thing. Because, for example, I disagree pretty vehemently with the YSEE, and Chrissy disagrees pretty vehemently with the AFA. So if you were to talk to them, they would express very, very different beliefs than either of us would. But we would express, both as pagans, different beliefs than each other. There are some things that we both agree on, but there are many that we don't. So I highly suggest talking to the individual believer rather than trying to assume broad strokes about the religion. If you're interested in Hellenism, I have an entire playlist called Common Hellenism that is very much a 101 for my particular way that I practice Hellenism and what I believe. I'm going to be working on theology stuff for my particular branch of Hellenism as well fairly soon. Oh, hey, Ocean. I see you in the chat.
Ocean!
So if you're curious about the particular Hellenism that I practice, I highly suggest starting there. Are there any other atheist creators that I want to talk to about allyship? There are quite a few that I never actually got around to. But the thing is because the coalition has shifted, that'll probably happen on Saturday streams if there are atheist content creators that are interested in coming on and talking about allyship. Let's see. I'm trying to find another question. Ocean, you absolutely interrupted my chain of thought. Congratulations. You have brought the brain gremlins as well as the tech gremlins. Let's see. I'm still trying to find more questions. There's a lot of discussion that's going on in the chat. You guys have been so wonderful in the chat, by the way. I've seen so much wonderful discussion going on. Bragwin, I completely agree, by the way. Consent is definitely a thing in worship. Just because a god calls you doesn't mean you have to worship them. In fact, if you don't want to, then you shouldn't. Like if you like object to something about that deity, then, you know, you don't have to. Like that's one of the things that distinguishes paganism from the various like Abrahamic religions. The compulsion is not emphasized in the modern day. Offerings given with an open heart and a proper reverent attitude are generally accepted.
Yeah, and there's also such a thing as having negative UPG.
Yes. I talked a little bit about it with Aphrodite. I've had negative UPG. Aphrodite is someone that I tend to like, I don't avoid her per se, but I only honor her on certain days because I don't feel particularly close to her. What sites do I mainly use to connect with the Hellenic community as a whole, and what online communities do I recommend? In my Discord, there's actually a list of allied servers. There's a Hellenism Discord that I'm very, very fond of that I highly recommend. The r/Hellenism subreddit, I'm in there, but it can be very hit or miss in terms of the toxicity in that community. I tend to mostly interact with the Discord communities primarily as far as connecting, just because Reddit can be very on again, off again in how its attitudes are. It used to be a lot worse than it is now, though. Let's see. Do I believe that one can manifest deity by channeling it through themselves, becoming a vessel for God effectively, or is that hubris? Depends on the deity and the religion. I think that within some systems of worship that makes sense. For example, there are some world walking practices in which like spirits and such are considered to be able to do that. Within Hellenism, I don't think that makes a lot of sense. What are your thoughts, Chrissy?
Yeah, that's what I have. I can say I have mixed feelings about that. Do I think that like the gods can could use us as vessels in a way? Yes. I very much would. I will say I very much question people that would claim that that's what's happening to them. Mostly
in other words, you think it's possible, but probably not common.
Right, because there's a specific history, even within this, within sections of various communities, unfortunately, that make this as a basically cult centerpiece. So,
Ikeda asks, what is negative UPG? The god says, leave me alone. No, negative UPG is when you have a bad experience with a god.
yeah.
Like Wolf has actually told stories about negative experiences with Loki, and I've talked a little bit about having had some negative experiences with Aphrodite. Negative UPG is just you've had a bad experience with a god and either don't feel particularly close to them or want to avoid them completely. That's what negative UPG usually is.
Yeah. Like when I was Canaanite pagan, I had a lot of negative UPG.
Ocean, by the way, thank you so much for the shout out there. Everybody drop a like that's hanging out in the chat. We've got 82 people and only 62 likes. Or, you know, drop a dislike. It's still engagement. Like you won't see me in your feed again. That's fine. You don't have to hang out here if you don't want to. You are welcome, Witchy Poo. I have done my best to make as healthy of a community as I possibly can. I do my best. But I want to give some credit to my mod team as well. Shout outs to them. I know I've been doing that a lot on streams, but the mod team in my Discord server and here in the live chat are fantastic, and they're a huge part of where that culture in the community comes from as well. So please give them some love next time you guys see them around, because they've done a fantastic job. That means Comrade and Fire and Witch, which is a mod in my live chat here, and Callan and Gainer.
I'm a mod in your live chat too.
You are a mod in my live chat. Most of my creator friends are mods in my live chat.
I'm not a creator. I'm special.
Gainer did a fantastic job on Saturday fending off the horde of Nazis and Folkists that we got. And I'm distinguishing the two, not because some Folkists are not Nazis, but because we had some people actually Sieg Heiling in that chat, which was very, very, very concerning to me. Like, why the hell are you here if that is your attitude? Like, have you not watched any of my content? You know you're not welcome.
Who's Sieg Heils in, like...
People who want to be banned from my live chat.
Apparently. Like, why... Like, okay, you're a fascist, but at the same time, like, I thought that part of fascism was trying to make people think you're not a fascist.
So Ikeda Hakubi, thank you for the super chat. Could you cover divine command theory? I thought by definition a god has the right to command worship, again coming out of Christianity. Oh, this is going to be fun for both Chrissy and I, because we're both a little bit theologically inclined. Divine command theory, in my personal opinion, is horseshit. Like, this idea, it comes primarily from the idea that because a god created you, they have absolute authority over your life, which, I mean, I don't even know if the gods necessarily created the universe. Like, there's several versions of the creation myth within Hellenism that state that, like, there were things that kind of emerged out of chaos, which is either an entity or sort of a primordial soup, depending on how you interpret certain things. Like, very well could have been that we came into existence, like the gods came into existence with the universe and either helped shape it, or like there was a lot of different ways that you can interpret that. I personally, like, am not a creationist. I think that we evolved and the gods took interest in us because we, like them, have minds. But that's my personal opinion. That's technically, like, there are other people who disagree with me on that quite a bit. But as far as divine command theory goes, it's basically the idea that the gods have the right to command you, and I don't necessarily think that that's true. It's also the idea that morality itself comes from the gods. I personally am a virtue ethicist. I don't think that all of morality comes from the gods directly. I think that some things are virtuous by nature of what they are and how they benefit the community. I think that a lot of our ethics actually come from evolution. I actually agree with atheists on this, and from social necessity. And I think that a lot, like, there is far more proof in history of our evolving ethics and understanding being essentially human than any idea of ethics being fossilized from a deity passed down directly to us. If they are, we have a really hard time understanding what those messages are, because we've done horrible, horrible things through a good chunk of history and are still doing horrible, horrible things to each other to this day as a species and to other species. So, like, I can't in good faith adopt divine command theory, because if the gods had this absolute morality that they were trying to pass down to us, either we don't get it or they didn't give it all to us at once, and neither of those things really make sense if you're attempting to ground all of your morality in deity.
Yeah. Like, my stance on divine command theory is largely along those lines. I have a few more choice words about it. I specifically think that the concept, at least in regards to Christianity, is one of the few marginally coherent ones that Christians actually have in regards to morality, because all the other ones are confused and nonsensical. At least when someone says it's good because God commands it, well, it makes sense to a degree. The problem is that
you then end up with Euthyphro's dilemma.
Well, yeah, you end up with Euthyphros dilemma, but the bigger problem I have is more that no matter how you look at it, it ends up becoming either God's either actually there's only one scenario. There's only one thing that comes of it. God's a monster.
Well, I mean, Yahweh is. Let's
Yeah.
let's use Yahweh's name because,
Yeah.
like, the Christians don't get the term God.
Yeah.
They don't.
Yeah. Yahweh is a monster, specifically because no matter how you try and look at that morality, either it's good because he commands it, or he commands it because it is so quote unquote good. Whatever his conception of good is and how it works is dog shit, especially if you're a mythic literalist.
Specifically for Yahweh. Like, I mean, honestly, if you're a mythic literalist for almost any religion, you're going to have a really hard time with divine command theory because, like, what the gods do and what they say supposedly is there's some disconnect there.
Oh yeah, you'll have massive problems no matter where you are, but you're going to have real big problems. Like, for example, I simply do not think that things are morally good or bad because the gods command any of them, or that the gods have anything to do with them specifically. I think that there are, Ali, I think that there are things that are good or bad in and of themselves. I think that there's also a large degree to which our morality has evolved. I am
but why those things are good or bad? I mean, you can go on and on and on about that. Ultimately, I think it comes down to what social evolution effectively. Like, we are a social species, and the things, like, I tend to ground things in both things that produce the least amount of suffering, but also things that produce the most positive outcomes for the group, which you have to be kind of pragmatic for those things. They're I also have a tendency to agree with a lot of the classical virtues, or at least the majority of them. I'm a Stoic, I'm going to. But the problem is that the moment that you apply any one specific philosophical framework, including divine command theory, you start to run into issues because, for example, pragmatism can lead to some absolutely horrific things, like pure pragmatism, absolutely pure, God, what's the name of it? I'm trying to remember. Utilitarianism can result in some absolutely horrific things. If you were to talk about what could possibly minimize suffering, well, if you were to feed that into a bot, they might decide to wipe out humanity because humanity is causing untold suffering to themselves and other species. The moment you try to ground your morality in one thing alone, you're going to run into issues.
Yeah. And when it comes to divine command theory, I mean, I can take the case of Carthage as a key example. I am quite very much of the opinion that there were Canaanite gods that did explicitly give UPG to their followers that made them think that child sacrifice was needed. It's far too prevalent not to have been the case in ancient Canaanite society. We have records of it for hundreds of years, where that's just completely disgusting. And we also have the literary evidence suggests that was also what they believed of Yahweh as well. There are at least 4 occasions in the Hebrew Bible where Yahweh receives or is about to receive human sacrifice. The most famous example being Isaac. There's also a case in the Book of Judges that's also rather well known. So yeah.
So this is a really fun question here that Jose Vasquez is asking for. Is worshiping a god or goddess to embody their values, or is it simply to establish a rapport with the deity and ask for their blessings and make offerings to them? Now, this can vary from person to person what their answer is going to be. Personally, I think it's both. I think that establishing reciprocity is essential to any form of worship, but I also believe, and I've got some historical basis for this, I'm going to be doing a video fairly soon on devotional activities. Embodying values and especially engaging in activities and interests related to the deity can be another form of honoring that deity. So I think that, for example, my knitting and crochet and sewing and embroidery and all of that, I see all of that, including weaving, as, you know, a devotional activity, as an offering to Athena, as one of the things that I do in order to honor her, because that was considered to be an interest of hers. I know a lot of devotees to Hephaestus who have taken up, you know, forge stuff and leather crafting and the like. I know, you know, though I know people who are interested in Artemis that took up archery. I think that there's a combination of those two things that becomes essential as your relationship with a deity evolves.
Yeah, I have the same opinion. Like, the writing I'm doing specifically with this Hengist and Horsa epic, I've specifically devoted to Woden. He's called the Word Weaver. He is called all sorts of things specifically to do with the transmission of word, of poetry, of writing. It's I specifically see that these things as reciprocity, as a necessary part of this is to establish reciprocity and also to embody their values as well.
So this is a pretty easy answer for me, but again, you're going to find people who disagree with me. Would you say that though we follow specific tradition, Hellenism, Chemeticism, Norse polytheism, that the gods are universal? Are, for instance, Hermes and Anubis the same god or different deities? I'm a hard polytheist. They're different deities. I also consider the Roman gods to be very different. And Comrade and I have actually talked about this. Comrade worships both pantheons and also considers them to be different. I don't think that there's just like one universal set of X number of deities that all of the different gods correspond to, or even that some of them are exactly the same. I think that syncretism is a thing that happens where people understand aspects of their own deities through interaction with another deity that's interested in similar things. But I don't necessarily think that all of the gods have equivalents, or I think it's oversimplifying and almost insulting to the ancient cultures to state that there are equivalents. I know that some of them did that, Interpretatio Graeca being key there, but Interpretatio Graeca was also significantly more complex than a lot of modern people would like to believe.
Yeah, I have the same position, and I am actually I do have a bit of a syncretistic tendencies, specifically because there's virtually nothing for Anglo-Saxons to work from, and then also because I have felt very much called through understanding Woden through the other aspect, which is Odin, in the Norse god Odin. I do view them as separate, but I experience and understand one and the other through both of them. I have had situations where I have felt like I have been called by Woden, but it's been through like transmission from Odin. So yeah, no, I am not I'm not Tacitus. No, not everyone who is who are twin gods are Castor and Pollux.
Do you think that every god anyone has ever believed in is real? If not, how can you tell which are true or not? So this is a pretty challenging question. Do I believe that they are all possibly real? More than likely. I mean, chances are if an entire culture was devoted to those deities, there is a very real UPG experience between that culture and those deities. How do I tell which ones are true or not? I don't make that judgment. I worship the gods that I worship, and I don't make a judgment on anybody else's gods. I have a tendency to frown a bit on UPG pantheons, just because the likelihood that a deity that is hitherto unknown would reveal themselves only to you seems kind of suspicious to me, and also potentially very culty. But like at some point, those deities introduce themselves to someone's or large groups of someone's. So like, if you're going to do you, as long as you're not trying to press it on me, then you're fine. But I generally believe like that the majority of the gods, if not all of the gods that in ancient times were worshipped, are probably real. Whether they are exactly the same as they were portrayed by those cultures means to be said. Like, bodiless minds, like disembodied minds, are so beyond our comprehension in the same way that there are probably aspects of mortality that they will never understand, that attempting to translate thoughts from a being both that ancient and that much more knowledgeable potentially there's gonna be something dropped somewhere. Like, we have a hard enough time talking to each other in different languages, let alone completely different bodily experiences.
Yeah. I will say that I have a few explicit exceptions. I generally do view that the vast majority of them have existed, but and do exist. But for example, there was as far as I'm concerned, there was never at any point a god named Moloch. I think that was I think, and I agree with Otto Eisfeld and with Heath Durrell and basically the majority of scholars now, that was a mistranslation of a passage in the Bible.
Cassandra, Chrissy said Woden, not Wotan.
Yeah.
Wotan is a Jungian thing. Chrissy is a polytheist, not an Ethiopagan.
And I won't go into it here, but I have exceptionally strong, negative, and very antagonistic opinions towards anything to do with Jung or archetypalism, really. I think I have very problematic views with both. I have views that both are problematic, I should say. I don't like them.
Okay, so I guess what led you to your worship of Woden then?
That was so looking back on things, I really actually first felt like a strong appeal to Woden. Honestly, as far back as like when we were first talking. What really got me into this was after I basically stopped all my research on the Bible. I cut like cold turkey in November. And what basically I just had a point where I decided I was going to sit down and I just wanted to meditate and listen. And that was it. And
so apparently Wotan is another spelling of the High German name for the Germanic god Odin.
Yeah, Wotan is, as Gaius in the chat points out, it's specifically a spelling that's a bastardization. It was created by Richard Wagner for his ring cycle. He based it off of basically a merging of spellings from the Old High German and I believe English, the Old English. Anyways, yeah, it was basically I took the time to just sit and I wanted to just clarify and think and experience about where I stood with the gods and what I felt I should do. And that's when I had a very, very clear call to actually just to do what I'm doing now and to it specifically felt like it was a call from Odin. And then later when I started actively engaging in praxis and ritual with Woden, it became very clear to me that I feel like almost Odin was passing a message to me from Odin.
So interesting question here, kind of. Chrissy actually was a Canaanite polytheist for the longest time.
Yeah.
What caused you to leave that behind, by the way?
Honestly, there were a number of things. I will say that my time as a Canaanite, practicing Canaanite polytheism, was a strong mixed bag of experiences. I had quite a few cases of very negative UPG. I did not personally feel like I developed a very strong connection with most of the Canaanite gods. That's not to say other people don't or don't have good UPG with them. I did not. And especially towards the end, reflecting on things, I feel like I was always just having the strongest pull towards heathenry. So
So my apologies, by the way. Gaius did correct me. So apparently Wotan specifically, which I know that Wotan is both a Jungian thing and the AFA is quite obsessed with that idea of Wotan being the spirit of German vengeance and all of the white supremacy garbage that goes with that. Woten, apparently, Woten, is one of the potential spellings in High German for Odin's name. Woden is another version, En. Wotan is often a dog whistle.
Yeah.
Or it's Jungian.
Yeah, if it's WOTAN, it's it's a dog whistle almost exclusively. If it's if it ends in en, WOTEN is the Old High German. WODEN is Old English. The OSIN is Norse. So yeah.
So thank you so much for correcting me. Again, I know quite a lot about Hellenism. I don't know near as much about some other faiths. There are some things I can answer questions on. There are some that I might not fully understand. This is why I have allies from other faiths that I bring on to talk about these things. Because I would much rather know it from a good source than assume that I understand things. Especially because, you know, a quick Google search can still screw you up. So let's see. What do you find is the single point and practice that you would recommend for a beginner? If you are interested in getting into practice for Hellenism specifically, there are 4 videos that I would recommend of mine that will give you kind of a broad overview of the way that a ritual structure would run out. One of them is the video on Miasma and Agos that talks about ritual purification, which is essential for the beginning. The second is the video on offerings, which is why did the ancient Greeks sacrifice? That goes over offerings and the attitude for them. The third video is the one that I did on piety, the Euthyphro's dilemma video that I did in response. That talks a little bit about what the relationship with the gods looks like. And the fourth is how to pray in Hellenism. Point and practice would be offerings and ritual and purification. All of those things kind of go together. And that would be that basic cycle of reciprocity being established, I would think is the most important thing to starting in a recon faith specifically, especially within Hellenism or heathenry. I know that Hellenists tend to be a lot more daily in particular with our offerings than some heathens are. That's not putting heathenry down. It's just a different structure to the religion, because in ancient times there was a sort of daily calendar that was run from month to month on the new moon. I'll be talking about that on my channel sometime later this year as well. I call it the Numinia calendar. That's not technically what it's called. But I am hoping that that video will help kind of clear up a little bit why a lot of Hellenists are very particular about making sure we offer just about every day. Chrissy, what would you say for heathenry?
Because I'm more on the Anglo-Saxon side of things, that's really difficult. And I also just came into it largely for the most part on my own. So I don't honestly know what would be a good starting place, really. I honestly, if you want to like look into his Anglo-Saxon stuff, you can talk to Beofeld in the community.
Wind in the World Tree, another channel that I would highly, highly recommend if you're looking for heathenry. Beofeld has a master's in history and is absolutely brilliant. Like, he's somebody that I have talked to and ranted to for hours about all kinds of historical subjects. He's a fantastic resource.
Yeah. From there, honestly, for my praxis in particular is very much informed by a mixture of what I can get from Anglo-Saxon and then also from Norse heathenry. So I would suggest for starting out actually going over to Ocean's channel. Ocean has a 10 introductory books for people to look at.
Yeah,
I
fantastic
definitely
video.
recommend it.
I concur with that recommendation. He did a really good job on that one.
Yeah, I'd look there as well.
Wolf also is an excellent resource on
Yep.
heathenry. He's actually got some uploaded rituals that were done in their server, where you can kind of see what a heathen ritual looks like firsthand as well. So if you haven't subscribed to Wolf the Red, all of those creators are actually, if you go to my channel page on the right-hand side, you'll see like a recommended creators list. All of those channels are in that recommended creators list if you want to find them. Why do you think Hellenism has so few followers compared to, say, Wicca and Asatru? I've always found this a little odd considering how much ancient Greek culture is engraved into our culture. So there's a few reasons for this. One of them is that the AFA is part of the reason why Asatru is so popular. They proselytize in prisons and such. And also there's kind of a mystique, I think, to ancient heathen culture that Hellenism has significantly less of because we have so much written sources. But also, I think that the fact that we have as many written sources as we do for Hellenism, and because it is as ubiquitous, it makes it a lot easier to think of it just in terms of the myths, like, and see it as a dead religion. Like, especially because so much of, say, Plato got integrated into Christianity, there's this kind of knee-jerk reaction a lot of people have, I think, where they automatically assume that the word myth means in no way, in any way true. There's no truth in this whatsoever. Like, Christians get upset when you call their Bible a book of mythology, but like it is a combination of mythology and history, right? And mythologized history. But like, you know, most of us don't get as near as offended because we're not mythic literalists. I think that mythic literalism also tends to hurt a lot of pagan faiths. Like, you start to look into some of those stories in ancient Greek religion and you're just like, you know, Zeus's dick just landed everywhere all the time. And people have asked me why I worship him because of that. Again, that's why I made a whole fucking video about it as one of my very first videos before I even started doing Hellenic 101 stuff, because that attitude is so prevalent and this idea of literalism is so prevalent. It is like swallowed up a lot of interest I think people have in the Greek gods.
Yeah, you can find that sort of thing everywhere, like in the mythology, in Canaanite mythology, Baal is married to his sister and then also has sex with a cow and then has a child with the cow. So, yeah, mythic literalism is exceptionally harmful, and yeah, I think just one of the most major problems there is that we have treated with disdain the entire concept of mythology as a Christianized culture for so long that there's like no way that people can like actually read mythology.
So Malkarth just gave a really generous $25 super chat. Thank you so much,
Wow.
Malkarth. Thank you both. This has been fantastic. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us. I always appreciate donations and stuff to the channel. Currently, most of these donations are going to be going to the channel, and we have some really good news. It's looking like my partner might have a job again soon, which means my Patreon money is going to start going back into the channel rather than just into my bills and stuff the way it has been very soon as well. So I'm really excited about that. He passed his background check, so we're just waiting on hearing confirmation that he's got the job because he's gone through all the hoops. So thank you again so much, and thank you for hanging out with us, everybody that's here. Like, honestly, having so many of you guys turn up for stuff like this really like warms my heart. I never expected to see a live stream with 70 people in it, let alone the 100 people or so that I got for my live stream over on Saturday. Like, you guys blow my mind every single time you show up, and I'm so grateful for all of you. Please tell us more about the prison video thing. You really deserve kudos for that. So again, there's not really much to tell. In my comments section, if this person is telling the truth, and I've got no reason to believe that they're not, because like asking me permission seems like a strange thing if that's not what they're doing. There was somebody who said that they were a chaplain that helps run a prison chaplaincy program, who asked me in my Folkism video comment section if they could show my videos to inmates, specifically the Folkism one, but then later on clarified that it was multiple religious ones, just as part of their chaplaincy program. And I said, of course, like, I would love to help fight hate. And I recommended a few other creators that I thought that they might want to look into for their pagan outreach programs. Apparently they have one specifically for heathenry. And they ended up saying that especially during the pandemic, like showing YouTube videos about various faiths, especially well-researched ones, is kind of what they're looking into doing, and that they thanked me for having done that. So apparently my videos are going to be shown to prisoners and to chaplains that are being trained in the chaplain program, potentially, by this person, both to fight hate, but also to educate about religion. And I thought that was really cool. And that was honestly, it was also kind of affirming. It was like, you want to talk about if that's a legitimate thing, if that's going to happen, like you want to talk about confirmation, like that's really freaking cool. I did not know that Troth did prison work and that the ADF did. I had no idea. That's actually really cool. The folks on the Longship website are staunchly anti-racist, by the way. But yeah, that's what that news is. It's just literally that happened in my comment section, and if that's the truth, which again, I have no reason why, like, unless somebody's trolling me, that the extended conversation that we had in the comments led me to believe that they're probably not, then that means something really cool is happening. And honestly, I'm glad that something that I made and that something that others made, because like I said, I wanted to pass along the, the stuff to other creators as well. I recommended Ocean and Wolf's videos and Witch's video on the folkism subject as well. Like, I think it's really amazing that something that I created might actually help bring some good into the world. Like, that's really amazing. Especially, what's the likelihood that a tiny 2,600 subscriber channel would come to the attention of, like, a fucking prison chaplain? It's mind-blowing, and I'm really, really happy about it. I'm not going to let it get to my head, but if it's legitimate, then I'm getting to help make an impact in the world kind of by accident because somebody happened to stumble into my content and like it, and that makes me really happy. What are our favorite snacks? So y'all are probably gonna laugh at me, but there are like these veggie stick cracker things. They're like a mix between a chip and a cracker. They're very puffed up and baked, and they have like this ranch seasoning on them. That's one of my favorites. I can only eat so much of them because I have a dairy allergy and it does trigger it. But it's mild enough of a trigger that I'm okay. The other favorite thing that I love to do is I love to get air pop popcorn, and then I take like a can of like the cooking spray, like butter flavored cooking spray, and I spray it on it. And then there's these powders you can get at the store for fairly cheap that are flavored powders of like popcorn seasoning. And I'll put some popcorn seasoning on that and toss that in the bowl. And that's one of my favorite snacks ever. I also really love pickles, and I love like Honeycrisp apples. They're like, especially when I'm like starving and it's close to dinner or something and I want something that's like low calorie, like Honeycrisp apples are delicious and the best thing on the planet, and they're huge and amazing and sweet.
I am a big popcorn person. I cannot get enough popcorn. If there is a god of popcorn, someone let me know.
2.6k subs, Witchy Poo. I have like 2660 or something as of the last time I checked, which, again, mind blown. I had like 1,800 subs a week and a half ago, and then a certain video that I made exploded and then got mirrored and exploded a second time. And my channel has been rapidly growing. I'm hoping that the new folks in my audience will enjoy my regular content, because I have no intention of becoming a drama channel at all. That stuff just does not interest me. I'm happy to do community cleanup and muckraking work if I need to, but like, I absolutely freaking hate doing any kind of drama stuff. I will go after somebody if I think they're like a genuine harm to the community and other people are not already speaking out about it. But most of the time, my preference is my place is educational work. Like, I prefer to make content that people can use and that they can learn from. And if you look at the majority of the content on my channel, that's what you'll find. I also have an addiction to spicy things, though that has a tendency to be meals rather than snacks. Sriracha is the mildest form of my addiction, but I love getting Thai food at Thai heat. So yeah, I have problems with spicy things, and by that I mean I love them too much.
I've never been a spicy person. My weakness when it comes to specific profiles is sour stuff. I love sour things.
So y'all can make fun of me for quote unquote being pregnant, but peanut butter and pickles are actually a thing for me. I actually really like peanut butter and pickles. I will dip pickles in peanut butter, and I've also had peanut butter and pickle sandwiches, and they're delicious, and nobody can tell me I'm wrong. Like, you could disagree with me, and that's your opinion, but like, I enjoy it.
Yeah, peanut butter. My thing's not the pickles. I don't like peanut butter.
Freya, I am so sorry. I like, at least you can probably get spices and make some, maybe? Well, welcome, and I'm glad that you found me through Cirrus. I hope you've been enjoying my content.
Cirrus is a good way to find people.
Cirrus is good people. Cirrus is actually the reason that I became a part of this community. I met Cirrus through now Xander Hall, formerly Pig Puncher. We were good friends. We kind of met through live streams and stuff back before Xander Hall even hit 10,000 subs. And Xander Hall introduced me to Cirrus for a thing that we were going to be working on together, like a sort of group project. And Cirrus and I ended up becoming really good friends, which neither of us really expected, but I'm really, really grateful for. Cirrus and Raz are actually two of my best friends in the community, and Cirrus was the one who introduced me to the channel that shall not be named, and that ultimately was how I ended up becoming a part of this community in the first place. I'm really, really grateful for that.
Yeah, Cirrus and Ocean were two of the first people I ever met in the community after being brought into it by we'll call him the Grand Wizard of the Agnostics. But yeah, met Cirrus and Ocean through him and eventually joined their Discords, and I have not looked back.
All right, so do we have any questions before we start to wrap up? I usually like going to about an hour and a half for my stream. So do you guys have any more burning questions? Did anybody's question get missed? I tried to make sure that I caught as many of them as possible, which is why Super Chats took a minute to get to. But if any of you guys felt like your question was missed, or if you have anything burning in your soul that you need to know before we wrap up, I'll take a couple more questions. Have you enjoyed the stream, Chrissy? I'm really glad that you came. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Like, it's been forever since I've had you on.
Yeah, I had a really good time tonight. Like, it's been way too long. my absence from the community, I've definitely felt for quite a bit myself. But yeah, I've had a very good time. Also, Witchy Poo says I found Callan through Cirrus, which led me to y'all. I found Callan because we got in a fight on Twitter.
Callan is another one of my best friends in the community. I am really grateful to have Callan. Like, Callan might drive me absolutely crazy sometimes, and I will tell her that to her face repeatedly, but Callan is one of my best friends in the community. Callan is, like I mentioned on Saturday's stream, Callan is one of the people who helped me figure out my gender identity, and I will be forever indebted to her for that. Ikeda Hakubi, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. Thank the gods I don't believe in the Folkists, etc. did not show up tonight. Yeah, I'm surprised considering how they bombarded my last stream. I am really, really happy that they didn't. John, I answered that question right at the very beginning of the stream. If you catch the VOD, it's one of the first questions that I answered. That's why I didn't answer it over and over again, because I answered that question right at the beginning. Let's see. We've got another question. I have another one. When a deity shows themselves to you but refuses to solidly identify themselves, what do you do about that? If they are actively refusing, meaning you get a very strong "I don't want you to know" response, that's a red flag in my view, personally. However, if you can't figure out who they are, doing a lot of historical research can be very helpful. Talking to the community and to other pagans about their experiences with deities might be very helpful. Sometimes if you don't understand and you have a conversation with somebody else and they suggest something might click in your head and you might realize that's who they are. But I think there's a distinct difference between refusing and having difficulty with figuring it out. So you kind of want to figure out which of those is going on also before you kind of just determine a path personally.
Yeah, I will say that the gods, when I was a Canaanite pagan, the refusal to identify was one of the primary problems I had with my experiences was the outright refusing to identify themselves, and like not leaving things that I could really trace or research to figure things out. So that was also specifically why I was exceptionally private with a lot of my experiences when I was a Canaanite polytheist. Allie knows about that. I think Allie's the only person I talk to about any of my experiences with.
Yeah, Chrissy and I go way back. I am a black hole of infinite knowledge. Anybody who talks to me about anything and does not want it known, it is not known. Let's see. What are the origins of the term UPG, SPG, and VPG? For those of you who don't know, that's unverified personal gnosis, shared personal gnosis, and verified personal gnosis. If I'm not going to get too deep into the definitions here, but if you want to know about it, Ocean Keltoy did a fantastic video on it, and so did Katya, actually. Katya is another really good channel to subscribe to. I have no idea who came up with them, actually. I've known of them from this community primarily, but I have not actually like done too much research on who did that. I wonder if Ocean would know. He might be worth it might be worth asking him. What is my favorite Hellenic resource, and why can the YSEE go fuck itself off a cliff? My favorite Hellenic resource is, and still like will always be, probably Hesiod's work. And Homer's works. I come back to Theogene, Works and Days, and the Odyssey and Iliad over and over and over again when it comes to looking at particularly Greek culture, but also like questions of Greek religion. Like they are the oldest sources, the ancients deferred to them. And there's a lot of theological depth if you're willing to dig and learn about the cultures and a lot of the presuppositions that they have. Every time I come back and reread those old stories, I find new things in them as my understanding of Hellenic culture deepens. So like that, those are my favorites. As far as Etic resources, Smoke Signals for the Gods by F.S. Neiden is both actually affordable as far as scholarly books go, still in print, which is a huge like boon, and readable. Like he's actually a pretty dang decent writer, and I really enjoyed reading it. I highly recommend it to anybody who's looking into offerings and stuff, who wants to learn more about the gods side of the thing, because unlike many professors and like researchers, he actually talks about the role the gods were said to play, rather than just like talking about all the cultural significance and trying to ignore the religious element entirely. Let's see. With a rusty electrified spork, referring to my go fuck itself comment. Yes. The thing is, the YSEE, there are folks in the YSEE that are apparently threatening to sue people who are criticizing them, but I'm going to continue to stand on their theology book itself. The edition of it that I had some extremely anti-Semitic stuff in it, and I've seen their members engage in some fairly racist rhetoric several times. I'm not a big fan of that organization. Their founder said some really yikesy stuff about race souls. I personally stay away from the YSEE. As far as I can tell, they are focused by the definition that Ocean and I coined, which is, you know, privileging, like using race or ethnic perceived ancestral ties to privilege or benefit or exclude. And I definitely would say that the YSEE engages in that. If you state that ethnic Greeks decide what Hellenization is, and in order to be a Hellenist you must Hellenize, then at that point I've got some criticisms for you. Gonna repost. How do you feel about worshiping gods from different pantheons alongside the Hellenic gods? Also, a thank you to Chrissy for linking those papers debunking Carrier. I'll let Chrissy respond to your thank you really quick.
Yeah, no, absolutely no problem. I unfortunately have a dearth of knowledge on things that shouldn't be important.
I personally think that doing so is valid. Worshiping other gods alongside the Hellenic ones. Like, I'm a multi-traditionalist. I practice like Haida religion as it was taught to me from like my great-grandmother and my grandmother, like separately from Hellenism. But if you want to syncretize Hellenism, the Hellenistic area is a gigantic hodgepodge of like Kemetic and Religio Romana and like Hellenistic and or Hellenic practices. So and there's also evidence of Sumerian, Babylonian, and Canaanite syncretism, and a little bit of Buddhist syncretism, even. In other words, syncretism is definitely valid. It's historically backed, but it's also just valid in general. If you want to worship gods alongside that, like, that's between you and the gods. I mean, Comrade would be the expert on syncretism, honestly.
Yeah.
Haida is my tribe. Haida. I am not registered with them, but I do have the ancestry. No, I'm not, somebody who's claiming da 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 da. I actually have records and papers and such to prove my ancestry. My problem is that we were pulled off the rolls, and the tribe has told me that I can't register because of it. But I do have Haida ancestry. I grew up speaking the language, and I was taught religious and cultural things by older relatives growing up. So I think this is about the time to wrap up at this point. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. 2.5K, that was way faster than I expected it to happen. I'm really, really happy about that. I hope that some of my new subscribers that came for the tea will still enjoy the normal content that I release, because tea is not my thing. I'm kind of allergic to drama. I break out in hives when I so much as sniff it. So I tend to try to avoid that, even though I've gone after some problematic people in the past and some problematic organizations. I tend to prefer to do a little bit of community cleanup and such, calling out folks that are harmful rather than engaging in just unnecessary drama. I personally think that holding gatherings with no COVID accommodations is extraordinarily dangerous. Even if everybody involved is willing, I think that is. And the stuff going on with the Wisdom of Odin, if you haven't seen that video, I laid out pretty carefully there what I felt like the problems were there. There's some pretty heavy red flags going on with a lot of that. So yeah, I tend to prefer not to handle a lot of dramatic stuff. I'm an educator at heart. I like to teach. And that's what I want to continue to do. So those of you that are new, I hope that you enjoy your time here, and I hope that you guys will enjoy the stuff that's coming out in the future. Thank you again, Gracie, for hanging out with me.
Thank you for having me.
So you want to say the wrap up together? Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us, and remember, we're stronger together.